All right, guys. So tonight we are going to be comparing the two areas of America that we've been talking about so far, Virginia and Massachusetts. And we're going to look at these two places side by side and compare and contrast. So we're looking for similarities and differences in several different areas. And we're going to start by looking at who lived there. So in Virginia, the first people to come over were single young men. It's not until much later that women begin to follow. And even still, the vast majority of the people coming to Virginia are single young men. Whereas in Massachusetts, we'll see that they tend to come over in family units. In Virginia, the people who came over tended to be Anglicans or members of the Church of England. Whereas in Massachusetts, we see these Puritans, these people who were hoping to purify the Church of England, and eventually they broke away from the Church of England and started their own congregations. In Virginia, they're primarily motivated by wealth and opportunity. They're looking for gold and silver originally, but later trying to make a lot of wealth through tobacco farming. In Massachusetts, these people are looking for a place where they could practice their religion freely. So, different motivations for the people in Virginia and Massachusetts. The next thing we're going to look at is economy, comparing and contrasting the economy of the two places. And just by looking at these two pictures, you can get a sense of what we're going to be looking at. So, in Virginia, the economy was based on the growth of tobacco, so tobacco farming. Massachusetts is going to be a little bit different. They are farmers, true, they're growing some food, but a lot of their economy is based on fishing and it's based on lumber or timber, all right, selling timber that can be used as a building material or used in building tools and things like that. In Virginia, the economy relied heavily on indentured servants and slaves. You remember that tobacco farming is a really labor intensive process. It requires a lot of workers. So they used indentured servants first and then eventually enslaved Africans to work on these tobacco farms, tobacco plantations. Whereas in Massachusetts, the work was done by family members. The whole family would kind of contribute to whatever the family trade was. In Virginia, the economy was centered around these large farms or plantations. We've discussed how the headright system led to these really large farms that were all spread out. Whereas in Massachusetts, the farms are much smaller. They're owned by individual families and worked by those individual families. The next thing we're going to look at is government in Virginia and Massachusetts. So, at first, we should know that Virginia was ruled by the Virginia Company. Eventually, the Virginia Company fails, and Virginia is ruled by a royal governor. Although we haven't talked about this too much yet, Massachusetts is actually governed by a company as well. And just like Virginia, that company is replaced by a royal governor. Now, in Virginia, we know one of their major accomplishments was the House of Burgesses, where they would elect burgesses or representatives from each county or plantation to go and speak for them in this House of Burgesses. In Massachusetts, we'll have the Mayflower Compact, where they agreed to make laws together. And this Mayflower Compact is a huge accomplishment of the Massachusetts colony, being the first written proclamation of self-government in the New World. In Virginia, the Burgesses were elected by white male landowners. And in Massachusetts, we had self-governing towns, which were run by church members. And remember, to be a member of the church who was part of this town meeting, you were a male. So in both places, we're limited to male representation in terms of government. So let's look at their communities. You can see from the pictures, Virginia, we have this very large plantation house, whereas in Massachusetts, we have a town with a slightly larger community. So Virginia, we have people living spread out. In Massachusetts, people are living in towns. Because these farms were so big in Virginia, there weren't very many of them. very few farms, very few plantations, but these plantations were massive in terms of their size, in terms of the amount of land that they had. In Massachusetts, they had towns. And these towns had to have a church and often a school if they had over 50 families in them. In Virginia, we'll see that every farm is kind of self-sufficient. So you'll think of every plantation owner ruling over their own self-sufficient community. Whereas in Massachusetts, instead, everyone had to help the town. So everybody is working together in a single community. So kind of a lot of independence in Virginia and a lot of communal effort in Massachusetts. And those are just different values that we'll see developing in those two places. And last but not least, we're looking at health and lifestyle. So living in Virginia in the early years was pretty terrible. More than half the people died in the first year. Massachusetts wasn't any better, though. More than half the people died in the first year in Massachusetts. Okay? In Virginia, by the mid-1600s, the average life expectancy was around 40 years of age. Whereas in Massachusetts, the average life expectancy was around 60 years of age. A lot of things are going to go into determining life expectancy, but climate, for example, the climate in Virginia is very hot, very muggy. There's lots of mosquitoes, so that could contribute to a lower life expectancy. Also, the labor that they're doing. Remember, tobacco is really labor intensive, requires a lot of backbreaking work. And oftentimes the people doing the labor are also indentured servants or slaves who their owners or masters don't really care about their health and well-being. So it's not surprising that the life expectancy in Virginia was about 20 years less than the life expectancy in Massachusetts at the same time. And that brings us to our response question for tonight. So if you were going to migrate to one of the British colonies during the mid-1600s, which would you choose? Massachusetts or Virginia? And when you're answering this question, I want you to explain which one you would choose and also give at least 3 specific, clear reasons for your choice. And be sure to print off your notes before class tomorrow.